Hey, um, so I'm Mark, and this is my channel, Several Books. I don't normally wear a tie. If you go through my videos or you've seen me before, the tie and the jacket might throw you. I'm always trying to think of ways that I can put my type of effort into creating atmosphere and driving engagement. However, my type of effort is typically limited to, dressing more nicely. This video is going to be on the African Samuel Beckett, is what Wikipedia calls him. I do see some similarities for about like 4 or 5 of the novels between him and Beckett's novels, but it doesn't really summarize him as a whole. The writer that I'm talking about is Alain Mabanckou. He is from the Congo. And I don't honestly know a huge amount about the Congo. I've read Alain Mabanckou's bio on Wikipedia, so I can kind of give you that general idea, but most of what I know about the Congo is limited to what I've read in these books. Now, how did I find Alain Mabanckou? Where is this coming from? The first thing is that I read French. I'm not as fluent as I'd like to be speaking it. I make definite errors. I have tutors, and one of them has told me, you're fluent, but if you listen to my videos, you'll see in the past when I attempt to speak French on camera at least, I'm making pretty bad errors. Part of that is nervousness. But Alain Mabanckou. So I was reading him in French. Trying to improve my French. I thought I'll read the rest of Alain Mabanckou. I also wanted to read something post-colonial. Post-colonialism for Alain Mabanckou is a thing. There is, like I said, probably 4 or 5 novels that maybe do kind of have a Beckett-like quality to them. But then he's got some more serious novels, or serious isn't the right word for it, but they are more outwardly political. Mabanckou is somebody who does not approve of communism. I do know that if you're watching my videos, and you see I have a pretty hefty amount of marks on my shelf back there, but I wouldn't call myself a Marxist. So I'm just interested in him and had read him for education purposes. What I want to say is that these books are not, they're probably a little different than the ideas that you have about post-colonial fiction. When I think of post-colonial fiction, typically I'm thinking of people in a village somewhere. The style of life might be a bit different than myself here in the United States. One writer that I've talked about who does write about city life from a post-colonial lens is Sunala Ibrahim. But Alain Mabanckou is kind of different probably than you're expecting. Even when he is writing about village life, the style that he uses, I had a friend who I used to talk to, and when he read Black Bazaar, he said that it reminded him of Evelyn Waugh. I've read some Evelyn Waugh. I don't particularly see Alain Mabanckou as an Evelyn Waugh figure, but I don't think it's the worst comparison in the world. I do think the Samuel Beckett one is a little better, but it doesn't serve for all of his work. The last thing I want to say, like I said, Alain Mabanckou is critical of communism. There will be some politics that pop up probably when I'm discussing the books. It's not going to be anything in depth because I'm simply not educated enough to provide you in-depth knowledge of politics in the Congo. I don't know really anything about it. It's all these books. But it is likely that I'll have to say, oh, this person in the book was a communist or something like that. All right, if those things sound cool to you, again, I'm Mark, and welcome. This is Several Books. So I'm going to go through these for the most part in order. There is a loose trilogy of novels. I'm going to call it a loose trilogy. It's a memoir and 2 novels that I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to rate those all together as one work. They are all available in English. Everything that I'm going to talk about here either is or will be available in English. Alain Mabanckou at present is a French literature teacher at UCLA, or professor, excuse me, and he is internationally recognized. There are so many literary prizes and awards that he's won for his work, it's a little bit difficult to keep track of all of them. As I present the books, I'm going to let you know if I know the book won a prize. But here we are with our first book. And this is Blue, White, Red. Now, again, this is in English. Everything I'm going to talk about here is in English. This was Mabanckou's first book. He won some type of prize for this, for African Voices, I believe. Basically, what the book is about is this guy growing up. And while he's growing up in the Congo, he's always dreaming of France. And he has, I think it's a cousin. It's been a little bit since I've read this one. But I think it's a cousin who does live in France and comes and visits. And eventually, the main character has the opportunity to go to France. In France, he basically struggles to make his way. I think he might end up getting involved in some illegal things, but it's not really a basis for anything huge. I don't want to spoil the ending. I'm going to do my best not to really spoil these. The big thing that I'm just going to say is just the very broad outline of the plot. Kid yearns to go to France. In France, he has these dreams of being truly French, reading Voltaire in a chateau or something. And these things that I think most people would say are probably a little silly. But that dream never totally leaves him. I'm not going to spoil the ending of the book, but this is probably really one of the least political of his novels, and this does deal a lot with the interactions with previously colonial countries and their European occupiers. Yeah. How am I going to rate this? I'm going to give this like a B+. Blue, White, Red is a B+. It's a great first book to read for Mabanckou also. This will give you a good idea of what he generally does. This is a little lighter on the Beckett influence, but again, I don't totally subscribe to that. I just find it useful because it's probably the best comparison I can come up with. His writing doesn't resemble typically the writing I associate with post-colonialism. It's not a variation of V.S. Naipaul or something like that. So B+, Blue, White, Red. The next novel that we're going to look at is African Psycho. Now, this is the first Alain Mabanckou book that I read. what I'd like to say is that the way I learned about Alain Mabanckou was from Akil Membe's De la Post Colony. It's Mabanckou is referenced in that theory book. The reality of how I learned about Alain Mabanckou was that I was scrolling through Reddit and looking at the book forums, and I just saw a one sentence post about African Psycho by Alain Mabanckou. And I thought, African Psycho, well, I really liked American Psycho. And seeing that in Africa might be really neat. There could be a lot of cultural differences there and everything. And I looked him up online, and Wikipedia has that one sentence that says he is the African Samuel Beckett. And so I was instantly sold. I got a copy of this book. I read it. It is so different from Bret Easton Ellis. I'm a little confused, almost even if Mabanckou realized when he wrote this and titled it that American Psycho exists. But yeah, so I heard about this book through the internet. I finished the book, and then I read basically all the other odes of his. I went out and I bought all of them at once. So this book doesn't really have any similarity to American Psycho. American Psycho has, almost a murder on every page. Not literally, but it's pretty excessive. And there's very graphic sexual content in that book. This has one murder that I can remember. It's kind of the crux of the story, so it's not like an American Psycho when it's just being thrown off. And we don't have like the long digression where the main character of American Psycho goes running through the city and all of this other stuff. This is really the story of one guy who wants to perform a murder. Now, this is a magic realist book. Some of the formatting on the page could resemble probably a modernist like Beckett. And if I'm remembering right, the main character talks to, I think it's the devil or something approximating that. Yeah, the story is essentially this one guy, he's poor, dreaming about murdering somebody and going through what's involved with that. The writing is humorous. This is not very political compared to some of his other books. Most of his books skew the outright political dialogue, but still, as I've said, things pop up. African Psycho, I'm going to give this like a C+. It really wasn't a great book in my opinion. It's probably his worst. But there are so many good things in his stack of books, so I'm really glad that I figured this just might not be his best work. I'm still curious to see more, and I went out and bought most of the other ones. The next book we're going to talk about is Vercasse, or Broken Glass. I believe this was the second Mabanckou book that I read, and it is my favorite of the 10 that I have read. The book is filled with allusions to classic French literature, post-colonial theory, and post-colonial literature. It's absolutely brimming with them. I don't remember a huge amount about it, which probably sounds funny because I did just say it was one of my favorites. Or rather, it is my favorite. But I'm in love with it, what I remember of it. The book is largely about a writer, and I think he's a college professor, and his life with a group of people in bars. I remember laughing in the book. Looking through it now, I had completely forgotten that this is like some of his other works. or two of his book. Looking through it now, I realize that both this and Memoir de Porcupine, Memoirs of a Porcupine, are written in a style that is essentially long paragraphs. So you'll get paragraphs that might border on a few pages every now and again, but he doesn't use periods. He uses commas. This is pretty... It's all surface level. It's textual. If you read the book, it's in sentences. But it is something to note. Some people might struggle with that on first reading. You get used to it very quickly. I would say it's no more challenging than reading certain works by Cormac McCarthy. As for like who I would most relate this book to, that would probably be Voyage au bout de la nuit, or Journey to the End of the Night by Céline. Céline is referenced in this book pretty clearly. The name of the bar where the people, hang out, where Broken Glass hangs out, his name's Broken Glass. It's called Voyage au Crédit, which sounds very close to Voyage au bout de la nuit and Mort au Crédit, which is the two first books by Céline. If those things are interesting to you, Céline especially, maybe Bukowski too, if you like Charles Bukowski, Vercasse, or Broken Glass, excuse me, it's his most known book. I don't believe that it won a prize, but I think it was The Guardian had a top 100 books since 2000 list, and I think Broken Glass made it in at number 98 or something like that. So it definitely has become kind of known. It's worth looking at. I'm going to give it an S. It is just by far, from what I remember enjoying of it, it really kind of blew me away. And what I remember thinking about it most was how large it felt. You really get a large number of characters who all seem to be fully fleshed out, but the novel is all of like 250 pages at most. And it somehow manages to be condensed into this little tiny 250 page book when it feels like one of these 700 page Thomas Pynchon type novels. So that is Broken Glass, and we're giving that an S. The next book we're going to talk about is Memoirs of a Porcupine. And this is written in the same style without the periods or terminal punctuation that Broken Glass is written in. It's not really a spoiler for me to tell you that the end of the book has a fictional addendum, which basically says that this book was written by Broken Glass, the protagonist of the previously mentioned novel. The book that this probably most reminds me of is like a kind of a minor classic called The Dwarf by Par Lagerkvist, I think is how he would say his last name. He won a Nobel Prize. I read the book a while ago. But basically that book is like the memoirs of this little angry dwarf guy who gets very tied into politics. This doesn't have as much of the politics as some of other books by... This does not have as much of the politics as some of the other books by Alain Mabanckou. There are things in this book that will make it interesting to a lot of different people. The big ones I want to talk about are like the dark humor. There's a character in here. So essentially what the book is the narrator is a porcupine. But if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy, massively multiplayer online RPGs, you'll be familiar with the idea of pets and familiars. And this porcupine is essentially the familiar of a wizard of some sort, or there's just a connection. He's not running around performing huge amounts of magic and ceremony. But there is cannibalism mentioned in this book, and I believe human sacrifice also from one of the negative characters. The main crux of the book basically turns into that the narrator, the Porcupine, essentially hates his master, and that kind of creates the whole book. I don't know if he hates him right off the bat. I don't think he does, but there's some resentment that shows up pretty early in the novel, and yeah, I that's basically what I was reading into it. But yeah, I'd say let's give this book an A. That's what we'll do. We'll give this an A. It's a great first book as well if you're interested in Mabanckou. It's not as good as Broken Glass, but it's really, compared to a lot of stuff out there, it's a great novel. So the next book that we're going to look at is Black Bazaar. As I said, I had a friend who compared the style of this to Evelyn Waugh. Now, in French, they call the main character of this Fesologue. He's a first-person narrator. The way that word is translated in English, I think, is buttologist. And the whole book is that there's this very, very classy dressing, very aesthetically concerned Congolese guy living in France. And the book is like the most clear, talking about it, post-colonial type interaction that I can really think of seeing in his in Mabanckou's oeuvre. Essentially, this guy Fesologue is he's infatuated with France, and in becoming infatuated with France, he's kind of butting up against race issues as well. And there are things about his appearance that he makes himself look more white by straightening his hair, and things like that. Most of the book is in bars. It really concerns that dynamic of the black guy in France. The bars tend to be pretty diverse, if I remember correctly. The book ends in a fork, and the main character has to ultimately decide between returning to Congo and pursuing a relationship with a white woman who he meets toward the end of the novel. It's not resolved. It's not clear, if I can remember correctly, exactly which one he's going to choose. I divulge that because I don't believe that it actually damages the book. Going into the book knowing that you're going to be talking about different cultures and the relationships of colonialism, and knowing that this is going to be a book that just forwardly addresses issues of racism and colonialism, of course the book ends in some kind of question of romance with the other culture. In my opinion, this is probably like a B plus also. This is not my favorite one of his books. It's a solid novel. I got my friend to read it before I had read it. I wish now that I had read Mabanckou first and been able to better advise beyond just Broken Glass is a great novel. But yeah, I think this is a B plus. It's a totally fair showing for Mabanckou, and we'll go with that. The next book that we're going to look at is called Black Moses in English. In French, it's Petit Piment. That's like saying a little spiciness or a seasoning, a little pepper or chili of some sort. This book is impossible to talk about as well without directly addressing politics. The book is basically about a boy in an orphanage, if I remember right, and the orphanage is it's under a communist government. Throughout the change in the book, the Communist Party starts to appear more and more out of touch with kind of just the world around and the things that people are going through in the Congo. I can't remember specifically what it is. There's a very specific critique he has in here, if I remember correctly, that is clearly the voice of somebody who has lived in a communist country critiquing that government. But again, I can't remember specifically what that critique was. What happens is that the boy leaves the school or orphanage, and he basically takes up with a madam of prostitutes. Can't remember the end of the book. Don't want to spoil it. This is a really good book. It was a long list for the Man Booker Prize International when it was published. I don't think it won that. No, I mean it was long listed. I know it didn't win. It wasn't my favorite of his books, but it wasn't bad. When I read this, I was again taken by how full these short novels are. I believe his books can't be more than 150 pages on average in English, the way that we sell our novels here. If I take one off the shelf, this is a much larger book. You can see pretty clearly that extra space there. So the words also tend not to be super small on the page. One other thing is that this character appears in autofiction by Mabanckou, Petit Piment. It's not clear to me if it's truly the same character or if it's basically a completely different invention, but in the late trilogy that I'm going to discuss, what I would say is that he does appear in Tomorrow I Will Be 20. Petit Piment, let's give that... let's give that an A minus. The final book that is unconnected to other books, it's not a trilogy, that I'm going to talk about is Le Commerce des Allongés. This is a very experimental book for Mabanckou. What makes it so experimental is not only that it is a magic realist book, but he uses a second-person narrator in this book. So it's two in French. Two fake sigh. What is it? It starts right in the first sentence. It's because it's kind of, it'll throw you off. Tu ne cesses to your first word. The way the book opens is that you are being basically guided through a tomb, and you find out you're this person who's lying down in the tomb. So you're dead. And you're being spoken to and basically being guided through, I believe it's 3 dreams. Your first one's kind of shorter, deals with his youth. Second one's a bit longer, but basically it's the same size. That third dream deals with his adulthood, and it takes up in total like half the book or so. I like the earlier dreams more because they're a little more absurd in general. There is mention of human sacrifice in this book. It's handled with a very darkly comic humor. And again, even though the book is in the second person, his voice is elevated. So this really does seem to be more deserving of the title, The African Samuel Beckett, in my opinion. This is not my favorite book by him, but it's a solid book. If you've never read a book in the second person, I would probably recommend Bright Lights, Big City by Jay McInerney. The other book that's really famous for it is Self-Help, which is a short story collection resembling self-help book narratives told in the second person by Lori Moore. But this is probably only the third or fourth book that I've actually read in the second person. So for successfully doing that alone, and keeping me as entertained as the other books, I'm going to give this also an A-. Alright, so the last books that we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about as a trilogy. They are not written as a trilogy. This is a very informal thing. This is me wanting to group books together that are so clearly referential, it's hard not to acknowledge that. The way they were written is that Demain j'aurai 20 ans. Tomorrow I will have 20 years, or tomorrow I will be 20. This was the first of them. The second was a memoir, which is called The Lights of Pointe Noire, Lumière de Pointe Noire. And the final of those was Les Cigons sont immortels. And that means the swans are immortal. So I believe that's how that's translated, but I'm not positive. To start, we'll just do the earliest thing first. My copy of this had a preface by J.M.G. Leclésio. Leclésio is a, I think, British-French author. He writes in French. He's spent most of his life in French. But I think somebody in his family was British. Maybe I could be making some terrible mistake, and he could be Breton or something like that. But he's a Nobel Prize winner. My favorite of his novels is the Interrogation, or Le Procès Verbal. I've read that in both French and English. He won the Nobel Prize in 2009. But again, unless you also speak French, which I'd be very happy if I had some French viewers just who were bilingual and wouldn't insult my French for not being very good. J.M.G. Leclésio's preface is interesting. It's probably not going to make it into English. Now, this book is basically the life of a boy in the Congo from 10 to 20. For me, what makes this book work is the amount of discussion of world politics and African politics in it. These three books in general more directly address politics than most of his other work. So the real political stuff that happens is every so often in the narrative. I think it's 10 times, obviously 10 years. We get reflections on who's getting the Nobel Peace Prize, what different presidents in different countries are doing, and it's all kind of told through the lens of this boy. You know, he's at most a teenager in most of this book. Now, all three of these books have basically the same characters. As I've said, Petit Pimont shows up in this one, but the big characters are the family characters. We do find out that the character Michel, who is very clearly a stand-in for Mabanckou, is essentially adopted. The word he uses in this is abandoned at one point, but he calls his parents. So he does call them Mama Pauline and Papa Roger, but yeah, I'm not totally spoiling anything with that. You find out very quickly that his relationship with his parents, because of the way that he's being treated and his parents are being treated, is impolite. This comes up in conversation. I'm going to rate all of these as an A+, and I'm going to call it one work. The first is his longest book. It's called Tomorrow I Will Be 20. Now, the second book I'm going to talk about is Lumière de Pointe Noire, or Lights of Pointe Noire. Pointe Noire is a city in the Congo, or a town. But this is, it feels like a continuation directly of Tomorrow I Will Be 20, even though this book is ostensibly from the perspective of Mabanckou himself. Now, this is probably my least favorite of the books that we're reviewing here, but big shocker, this is the one that's being marketed in the U.S. as a memoir. So, The Lights of Pointe Noire, I believe, is how that's translated. This would drag down the score of the other two. That said, it does kind of continue the same characters. So while it's disappointing that through most of the book, many of the characters just seem to be asking the main character for money after sharing sad stories, it's not my favorite. So again, we're going to rate everything here as just one work and give it an A+. Now, The Swans Are Immortal is my favorite of these three. Now, chronologically, what we've got going on here is this starts, when he's a baby. It's technically at 10 because that's when he starts narrating, but he's mentioned as a child in the book. This book is coming back after leaving Pointe Noire 20 years later and encountering people and talking about the books that you've written if you're Alain Mabanckou. And the style of writing in this is much more thoughtful and longer sentences and so forth. Now, The Swans Are Immortal is, I don't remember the exact age of the main character. I don't know if it's ever given. It seems to be younger than 10. I think he might have said that he was 9. I wouldn't be surprised if he was 8. The voice in this book is very solid from what I can tell. My French isn't perfect, but it does feel like a kid is telling the story. Now, this book kind of reminds me of Don DeLillo. So that's probably a strange comparison if you're thinking post-colonial literature. But what happens is that Michel, which is the main character, the stand-in for Mabanckou, and his mom and dad, basically, well, the president of Congo is assassinated, and this is during communism, and it turns out that Mabanckou's parents are related to, or Michel's parents are related to a general in the army of the president. And the general is also assassinated. And for most of the book, you've got people participating in these very family-oriented kind of stories and so forth. And then you get long discussion about the president who what happened. And I mean, it's very much a more French-inspired style of relating a story, and more sensual, simple, and so forth. But the way that he talks about the president of Congo and what happens resembles things that I think of as the media critiques in DeLillo. And you get very much kind of, they're not at the forefront, but these questions about like celebrity and how these specific events in national consciousness can impact the daily lives of people everywhere. So we're going to close this out, and I'm going to say that that is Lumiere de Pointe Noire, or The Lights of Pointe Noire. I think that is Dimanche j'aurai 20 ans, or Tomorrow I Will Be 20, and Les Secondes sont immortels. We're going to give those together in A+. In truth, I'd probably say that The Swans Are Immortal is an S, and these two probably an A and a B. So, if to say, no, you should read all three if you're interested. Hold these off till you've read Broken Glass. Check them out and read them all together. Alright, guys, so that's been me for, it looks like, 40-some minutes on my clock. Sorry it's been so long since I've posted a video. I did read some stuff that I don't know if I'll have the opportunity to talk about in the channel. I read Richard Rorty for the first time, Philosophy in the Mirror of Nature. I am completely better from having taken medication that I had side effects with. And yeah, I just appreciate everybody here. I was psyched to make this video. It's been probably like 6 weeks since I've made a video. So I hope you all are great. Several books out. Thanks. Bye-bye.